Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to another episode of ResearchWorks podcast. We're here at EACD and IAACD 2025 in Heidelberg. And my guest with me today is another person who's instrumental in making this all happen, the Vice President of EACD, Dr Christian Shaaf. Hello.
Hi, Dana. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here today. And it's just been such a pleasure to meet you and to get to know you. First of all, tell me, how did you come to be Vice President of EACD and involved in this magnificent conference?
So I'm the chairman of the Institute of Human Genetics here at Heidelberg University, and we've been working very closely with Rainer Blank and his team for many years. I've only been in it for the past 6 years, but we go and see patients at his social pediatrics center. We do consults there, and so we got to know each other personally.
Right.
And I think it's been Rainer's lifelong dream to, at one point, host the EACD and potentially the IAACD meeting here in this region. So he asked me if I would be interested in being vice president, along with him in the team. And I said yes. And that's how it got started, 4 years ago. And it's been a long time in the planning.
Yeah, it really has been, hasn't it?
Yeah, sure.
And it is an incredible conference in an incredible place, Heidelberg, which is your home. Tell us a little bit about why you love Heidelberg so much. I mean, I've walked around a little bit. I think it's gorgeous, but there's so much more to it.
Yeah, I went to medical school in Heidelberg. So, I have a lot of good memories of those days here in the city. It's a small place. I guess in the US, you would call it a college town. There's only 170,000 people living here, and out of those, about 50,000 students. So it's a very young city, but it's also one of the most international cities in Germany. Everything is walkable. I actually ride my bike to work every day, just along the river. It's beautiful.
Wow.
And has a very high quality of life, I would say.
Yeah, it is absolutely beautiful. And just you can feel the history, and the river that runs through is just a beautiful place. And I didn't know that about Heidelberg in terms of being like a college town. And you can definitely see it when you walk around. There's a lot of young people here. Tell me a little bit about the work that you do, because that sounds like not only a very interesting area, because when I asked you the other day, you said, I just do genetics, and that's the sole focus, but it's a big area, a very almost booming area that people are becoming to understand. What drew you to it in the first place?
So when I started medical school, I wanted to become a pediatrician because I always loved working with kids, loved working and helping kids.
Yeah.
But then, during my rotations in pediatrics, I realized that I was most interested in the medical mystery cases. Those kids who had a more complicated story, who had kind of multiple challenges, and nobody really understood what the underlying cause would be. And in many of those cases, the underlying cause turned out to be genetic. So that's how I got drawn into genetics. And that's still what I love most, kind of solving medical mysteries. But also, I mean, the field has really been flourishing over the past 20 years. And to kind of be able to draw a line between molecules and medicine to really kind of understand how the change of one single letter in your genetic code can determine whether you have a kind of lower risk for certain conditions or whether you have a higher chance of having a disability, intellectual disability, autism spectrum disorder. That I find very fascinating. And I think there's a lot of potential from understanding the molecular mechanisms to also kind of get to the point of thinking of potential therapeutic avenues.
Yeah. Out of all the things that have happened of late, what is the one thing that stands out the most as an incredible advancement that has really shaped practice?
I think, genetics has been methodologically driven, and 20 years when I went to medical school and I look at a genetics clinic, I mean, the patient population was similar, but with the technology that we had available then, we were only able to solve maybe 5% of cases. Now in our clinic, we solve 50% and more of the cases because of the availability of exome and genome sequencing. Things that cost more than $1 million a few years ago and took us 2 or 3 years to complete, we can now complete within a couple of days. And, they're affordable and they paid for by insurance, basically.
That really is quite an advancement. And it's such a huge leap, really, when it comes to the knowledge that can really support a family in their journey, especially when there's so much uncertainty. What's the work that your institute does that is the big focus at the moment?
So the Institute has different groups and we kind of focus on different organ systems. My own interest lies in neurodevelopmental disorders. And I've been lucky, along with my team, to discover a few new genetic diseases over the past 10, 15 years. And 3 of those disorders we study in great detail. So we're in touch with patients around the world, kind of try to learn from them and understand the natural course of the disease, genotype-phenotype correlations. In the lab, we generate animal models, mouse or rat models, to kind of model the disease and then understand the disease on a molecular basis. We also test new therapeutic avenues, kind of using those model systems. And then in a third line of research, we use cells that we generate from patient samples, for example, fibroblasts, and reprogram them into pluripotent stem cells and then differentiate them into neurons or organoids to also kind of better understand the disease.
Wow, that's incredible. And that, I suppose, the other big sort of buzzword is, personalized medicine, which some would argue every part of medicine is personalized. But I suppose this relates directly to the very unique circumstances that you might find, which I suppose is part of rare diseases. Can you help me tease that out a little bit? Because I feel like rare disease has gained so much international attention. There's amazing collaborations that are happening out of necessity. And I talk to families all the time who are finding ways to connect with other people in different parts of the world that might have the same condition that they might have. So when you're looking for these rare conditions, genetic coding, how does that work internationally when it comes to collaboration?
Yeah, I think, for the rare diseases, the only way to actually move forward is to connect internationally, because in a specific region, there's, simply by definition, not enough people such that, you would kind of gain meaningful insight. In fact, a big part of my own research group is in Phoenix, Arizona right now.
Oh, wow.
At a rare disease conference, because we do study Prader-Willi syndrome and Shaaf-Yang syndrome. And there is an annual conference, and it just happens to take place at the same time as the EACD conference.
Okay.
But it's a beautiful way to connect. And, the motto is very similar to what we see here at EACD. It's about building networks, right? And it's about building international networks of researchers and physicians and therapists who care about individuals with that particular disease. But it's also about building networks with the families, because these are so tremendously powerful, these connections. We learn from them. I mean, everything that I know about Shaaf-Yang syndrome, I learned from the patients that I encountered.
Yeah.
And I continue to learn from them. And then because it's such a rare disease, for them, I'm one of the go-to people in the world, because there's not that many who really have a deep understanding of the disease.
Yeah.
And so it's really a mutual relationship that's very fulfilling. And you did ask about, that concept of like rare disease. Think of autism spectrum disorder. Autism is not uncommon, right? I mean, we have a high prevalence in the general population, but there's hundreds and thousands of underlying conditions. And, in part, that's why we call it autism spectrum, because it's really hundreds of conditions. If you look at like 10 individuals with autism, they're all so different, right?
Yeah.
One may have just idiopathic autism. The other may have autism and epilepsy. The third has autism and ADHD and OCD. They're all different because ultimately, molecularly, many of them are very, very different.
Yeah.
And by understanding the molecular underpinnings of the specific case, we can gain deeper insight, and we may be able to help them, also guide them, provide them with anticipatory guidance based on that understanding.
That's brilliant. That was my next question, because as a therapist, we are sort of on the other side in terms of supporting functional capacity. What we're often involved with a lot is, in a way, trying to foresee what that child may need as they get a little bit older. And for cerebral palsy, for example, the GMFCS is a wonderful tool for us to go, okay, at this age, we might expect this. You might expect this development to happen at this particular point, just from a gross motor perspective. Now, for children who don't, I guess the wider group, the heterogeneity that many children will present with, what would your advice be for us as therapists to be able to, I don't know, to map out what children might be presenting at as they get a little bit older, whilst given the really unique features they might have? I feel like we need to know a bit more of a care pathway, or develop one for each of them. I don't know if I've asked that correctly. It was very,
yeah.
You know what I mean?
it's a tricky question, right? Because on one hand, there are symptoms that you can treat no matter what the underlying diagnosis may be, right?
Yeah.
If the child has dystonia, you try to, treat the dystonia through your therapy. But at the same time, there's value in understanding the specificities of the disorder.
Yeah.
And especially for the rare diseases, I feel it's really worth reaching out to the world experts on that particular disease. So when we, like on Friday mornings, typically right now, I would be sitting in clinic in our genome sign out, and we talk about all the solved cases of the last week. And, every week there are conditions that I've never heard of.
Wow.
Right?
Okay.
But it's in the nature of things, right? There are more than 8,000 rare disorders that we know, and there's no possible way I could know all of them, by heart and deeply. So often I say, let's look up who's the leading expert on that condition, and we'll send him an email.
Right.
Just like, people send me emails from all over the world about those few conditions that I'm expert in.
Right.
And that can really help, because they can talk about what they know, what they understand. A lot of that evidence is not published yet, and is kind of personal experience.
Yeah.
So kind of to talk to them, be it by email or brief kind of Zoom call, can really make a difference and help you and the family understand better, like what the kind of anticipated path may be.
Yeah.
Like next week on Tuesday, I have the next Zoom call that we arranged between like a physician from the team caring of the child right now, who's unfortunately in the intensive care unit, and the family and myself, to really kind of make a plan of like what's ahead.
Wow. That's wonderful to know and to hear about, because I think sometimes we don't think to do that. Yet email, Zoom calls, they're so readily available and accessible. Sometimes when we meet children, I can think of my own clinical experience, and the parent tells you the exact condition that they might have, something we've never heard of before. You'll look it up. You might not find very much on it. The parents are usually very good at saying, look, this is what we see. These are some of the symptoms. And you formulate a bit of a functional plan. But that next step of reaching out to someone like you would make so much sense, wouldn't it? That's and
there may be people who don't want to be approached, but it doesn't hurt. You send an email. If they don't want to get back to you, they won't get back to you. That's okay. You tried.
Yeah. Got ghosted on that end. But it's really good advice to have. I suppose moving forward now and looking ahead, because you're on the cutting edge, you know what's happening. What is on the horizon that you think is on its way, and how do you think that's going to impact science?
I think what we've seen and heard also at the conference is that early diagnosis is key, because in particular of the kind of thought of neuroplasticity, right? The child brain may be more kind of plastic, more amenable, like at an early age. So if you miss a lot of time kind of on the diagnostic odyssey and only diagnose the child at age 6, 8, 10 years old, you may have missed at least part of that therapeutic window. So I think the key is in early diagnosis. And one of the ideas that we are contemplating right now is the idea of genomic newborn screening. Now, that is ethically challenging, right? Because if we sequence the genomes of all newborn children, we would be generating a lot of sensitive data. We have to think very carefully as a community as to, what would we be looking at and what would we want to be looking at and what would we want to report.
Right.
We've had a project here in Heidelberg over the past 3 years with medical ethicists and lawyers and psychologists and people with lived experience, pediatricians and human geneticists, kind of discussing those ethical issues. And we've come to kind of suggest that, yes, genomic newborn screening may be a path forward, but we would only want to be looking at diseases that manifest in early childhood with high prevalence,
Sure.
that are severe and really debilitating disorders, and for which there's enough evidence that if you find them early and treat them early, the outcome will be significantly changed in a positive way. And we're currently applying for funding and hope to kind of start a pilot project in that regard within the next year.
Wow.
I think ultimately there are a lot of pilot studies in kind of on that topic worldwide, and I think that is something that lies ahead of us, maybe as a population-based screen in 10, 15 years from now.
Right.
I think it's an ethically challenging topic, but a topic that will have a lot of potential because we will be making early diagnoses and we will be able to treat children earlier and better.
Yeah, that's incredible. And that's an exciting future direction, but I understand exactly what you mean. It is, the ethics does require time to tease out and think about because there's a lot of information that can be generated now.
Yeah, you have to realize, as human beings, we have the right to know, but we also have the right not to know.
Yeah.
And newborn children cannot make those decisions for themselves. Yeah. So the parents will have to make those decisions. And that by itself is challenging.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely. Christian, I'm just so grateful for your time today, even just the few moments we had to speak today. You do live up to your name. Every time I speak about you, someone's like, have you spoken to Christian? He's incredibly intelligent, very, very smart. You must talk to him. And I can definitely get that sense already from now. It's an exciting feature, and to know that your team is doing this kind of work and really fostering these collaborations and networks. It's true to the whole theme and the heart of this conference. So congratulations on this conference.
Thank you, Dana.
Absolute success so far, and it will continue to be so. For all of our listeners, I hope you really enjoyed that as well. There's so much more to come in this Research Works podcast series at EACD. We'll talk to you all again really soon. Thanks and bye.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.